Welcome, 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 welcome. We are back with another episode of Men Know Something. So today we have an episode of Men Know Something, and as you know, these are smaller segments of the main Men Know Nothing, where we kind of individually, myself in this episode on my own and Dan on his own, give our opinions and our take on a specific topic. And today we are talking about why men won't approach you. And by you, I mean women. Why are men not approaching you on nights out or even just in the wild? So as usual, before I get into the main thing, please like, subscribe, share, comment on all our fucking posts, please. Thank you very much. That's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, all those beautiful stuff. Now, into the main episode. So I'm going to be giving you the top 5 reasons why I think men aren't approaching women. So now the first one is, I think a lot of women don't realize how much men genuinely overthink when they want to or if they're going to approach you, especially out and about in public when there are a lot of people around. I think it's the idea of the fear of rejection that sits quite heavily on a lot of men. And because as a whole in society, men and both women are expected to and do expect men to do the approaching, it adds that extra layer of pressure. And the thing with the pressure is that it doesn't really subside for men until they actually start actively going out and approaching. Because if you never actually do the approaching, that sense of fear of rejection is always going to be there. And at the end of the day, rejection is a part of life. No one is going to be able to approach every single person that they see out, and it'll always be a yes. No way. One, not everyone is going to be, you're not going to be everyone's type. And 2, you need to think that a lot of these people and women as well are going to probably have boyfriends. So again, rejection straight away. So I think that's something that we need to look into. It's the overthinking. But then you have to think, why are you overthinking? What's the worst thing that could happen? She could say no. She could tell you to fuck off. But at the end of the day, these are non-playing characters for the most part that you're approaching out and about. For the most part, you're probably never going to see these girls that you're speaking to and approaching on a night out or in a bar. So in my head, if you really want to, and if you have the urge to, and you see someone that you're really into, just go up and say hello as a guy. But women, it's also good to be aware that if a man approaches you, it's quite a big statement. So I think it's important for women also to be open to the idea of a man approaching them and not be surprised. Like, back yourself. If you're a girl and you know you are it, you know you are that thing. If a guy approaches you, should be like, of course he's approaching me. Of course. Look at me. I'm the it girl. I am that biatch. You know what I mean? That you are that girl. So if a dude approaches you, see that as a compliment. And even if you're not into him, as long as he approaches you in the right way, let me preface that. If he approaches you in the right and respectful way, you should just be like, oh, not interested. Thank you, though. Have a nice day. And for me, if I get approached by a girl, like randomly out in the streets or in a bar, that's helping my ego. I'm like, okay. Y'all are interested. I'm not, but y'all are interested. It's good. And it also plays into the idea that obviously a lot of men do the approaching, but I guess now in society, it is coming to a point now where women are also doing the approaching, and that's for a multitude of reasons, but we'll get into that later on in the episode. But number 2, maybe they're just genuinely, this is why men won't approach you, maybe they just aren't interested in approaching you at all. like at all. There has been an increased percentage of men who aren't dating or who aren't even interested in dating, and also increased percentage of men who literally don't even care whether they're having sex at all. And now that is for a bunch of different reasons. I think the change in society and where men see themselves in society compared to where they would have been in the 60s or the 70s or the 50s. And I think the issue is with a lot of men now in the dating world compared to back then, a man's, a man's position in a relationship or in a marriage was very, very obvious 60 years ago. A man's position in a relationship was to provide, to put a roof over their heads, to make sure there's food on the table from a financial standpoint, paying for the food. And I think the issue, and women back then weren't really working. A lot of women back then were housewives. So men really only needed to provide a safety net of finance and a house for women and kids in order to be eligible men to be married to. The issue is nowadays is that women now have or can provide for themselves in every shape and form. They can work, they can buy their own houses, they can buy their own car, they can have they can open their own bank account. Whereas before that was not possible. So now the society has shifted and women have upped their game and is now able to provide for themselves financially. For the most part, a lot of men are quite lost because that would have been, especially in certain cultures, that would have been their sense of identity, providing for their spouse. And the issue is now that men haven't been taught how to portray and how to be in their feminine energy or to portray characteristics that are known for being feminine. Stuff like being emotionally intelligent, being able to communicate, just being able to just open up and be real. Like, men have never been taught how to do that. So now that women are able to provide for themselves on a level which men used to provide for them 60, 70, 80 years ago, men now need to step up and add more. And a lot of men just can't do that. So now, as you can see, from this heightened percentage of men who aren't dating, who aren't interested in dating, and who are completely sexless, that is a part of it. A lot of them are lost because they've never been taught how to do anything else but provide financially. And women just don't care. Well, for the most part, a lot of women don't care about just the amount of money you have and your looks. There's so much more that women are looking for in a potential partner that they see themselves with long term. Okay, you could be a guy who has a lot of money and you're decent looking and you have none of those key attributes that a woman is looking for in a long-term partner. You might be able to get a girl to date you here and there. You might have short stints of relationships, 6 months, 1 year, whatever. But it's going to get to a point that if you don't actually provide more than your finance and your looks, like, the girl or the woman that you're dating is just not going to be interested and will lose interest if you're not stimulating her on multiple levels. Another reason why there has been a struggle is that studies have showed that 86% of women want men to make the first move. But then there's another study that showed that 50% of men are afraid of making the first move because they're afraid of being seen as creepy. So there's a massive issue there in that. So you have 86% of women who expect men to make the first move, but half of the men out there are afraid of making the first move because they're afraid of being seen as creepy. And I'd actually put out a little question box on my Instagram story to ask both men and women, why do they think men aren't approaching, and women, why are men not approaching you? And one lady came back to me and says, girls will only find you creepy if they aren't attracted to you. If you're ugly, most girls will find your approach creepy. That's what she said. Girls will only find it creepy if they aren't attracted to you. If you're ugly, most girls will find your approach creepy. And Lord, I hope that is not true. I mean, it is to an extent, because pretty privilege works just as much for men as it does for women. So I can kind of get what she means. I do think the creepiness comes from how how it is approached by the man, but I think there's a level of truth there, whereas if you're an attractive man, you attempting to approach a girl 7 to 8 times out of 10 will be accepted with open arms. Whether she takes your number or is interested or not is a different story, but the idea of you approaching her as a good looking guy, you're probably gonna get a good response in whatever way that may look. And another study actually talks about that 20% of Gen Zers say that a man approaching them always or almost always constitutes for harassment. And they feel, which means that they feel harassed by a guy that approaches. So we're in a situation now where women are afraid of being approached, but they still expect men to do the approaching. And at least 1 in 5, 20%, of men who do actually approach will be perceived as being creepy. But everyone in society, or for the most part, people in society understand that if men don't actually make the first move, nothing will genuinely happen in the dating game. And if they do, they're afraid of being called out for being creepy. And a lot of women are in turn then also afraid of men doing the approaching. But then 86% of women expect a man to approach first. So you can see where the discrepancy and the issue lies, where there's both sides of the coin, one side men, one side women, have an expectation. So there seems to be a lack of balance between what is expected and what is being done. So again, that is coming down to, I guess, society and how people are seeing the world and how people want the world to be. And the next one is going to be social media and online dating. Now, before social media, the only way you could genuinely meet someone is either by a random pen pal website or outside. The issue is now with social media and online dating is that people now have the ability to communicate and pretty much court online. And this is now adding to the difficulty when it comes to actually speaking and communicating out in person. Because what will happen is, and I've seen it on a number of occasions, where a guy and a girl will probably be in the same venue or in the same shop or whatever, and they'll probably see each other and they'll probably be somewhat attracted to each other, but neither of them will approach. But then one or the other will go home, go on social media, find that person, and then message them being like, hey, I saw you in the coffee shop, or hey, I saw you last night in the club, thought you were pretty, and then start talking that way. But in my head, it's like, why would you not, if you've gone through the effort of going on social media to find this person that you saw out in public and then message them to strike up a conversation, why is not that not just being done in person? And the thing is, when you do it in person, it literally cuts out so much of the pressure of then impressing when you finally meet each other. Because when you meet someone on social media or on one of the online dating sites, when you start talking to them over that, you then start to create a version of them in your head that might potentially not be real. And the issue is when you start to create that version of them in your head based on what you're talking to them over text in your head, when you meet them, there's a potential for you to be insanely disappointed. Insanely. The person might not be as talkative as they were over text. The person's body language might be very uncomfortable looking as hell. Like, there's so many different things that can happen when you meet them for the first time. So there's advantages to just going up and speaking to the person. You can qualify them out straight away. Another reason why men probably aren't approaching you or just approaching women in general is like, maybe your body language is not giving approachable energy. Maybe you look miserable. And that goes to both sides. You know what I mean? Men, women aren't speaking to you, and women, if men aren't speaking to you, maybe you just look miserable as fuck. Sometimes you just gotta fix your face, if I'm honest with you. And at the end of the day, 80% of how we communicate as humans is through body language. So if you're in a club, if you're in a coffee shop, and you are in a place in life where you're expecting or want a man to approach you, or if you're wanting to date and you're out and you never get approached, because as we just spoke about, 86% of women expect to be approached first. If the body language that you're giving off, and if your face looks upset and miserable, then no one's gonna come up and talk to you, no matter how pretty you are. Like, no one's gonna want to approach you. And this is only going for people who want to be approached. I mean, if you're just chilling in the club or in a coffee shop or in a bookshop or whatever, and you don't want to be approached, by all means, have a miserable face and have a very miserable body language. But for people who do want to be approached, your body language and how you come across to someone before they say anything is so key. And this also goes for men out there. Your body language whenever you're approaching someone and how your face looks when you're approaching someone is also key to having a positive response from a girl. And the next one I'm going to give you is cultural and societal expectations. And now this has been quite a regular response from people. In my comment sections when I've asked this question into my DMs, a lot of them have said that there is a massive difference between the dating game where they're from compared to, I guess, well, I'm I'm in Sydney. So, for example, I have a lot of American friends and a bunch of American followers, but they all mention to me that them approaching, this is both men and women, by the way. So let's go for the the guys who have mentioned me. They've said there is a massive difference between the dating and approaching culture in Sydney compared to the US, because they have said on multiple occasions that in the US, approaching someone is just so normal. You see a girl you find attractive, you'll happily just go up and approach her instantly, say hello, and if she's vibing with you, you chat, you exchange numbers, and you keep it pushing. And if she's not vibing with you, you say okay, you move on. The thing is, they've said that in Sydney, they've tried the approaching method just like that, and a lot of the times they're not met with a positive response, let's just say. And because they're not really met with a positive response, this will then trigger them into thinking, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I think what I need to make clear is I genuinely don't think a lot of men care about having to approach. I think we're all aware that in the society that we live in, especially in Western society, actually, you know what, in most societies, not just Western, but in most societies, it is expected that the man will approach. So I know that for most part, a lot of men are aware of that. I think the issue is a lot of men are afraid of the reaction of the girl that they're going to approach, especially if you're typically not a guy who's deemed to be societally good looking, if that makes sense. If you would consider yourself to be average or below average, a lot of men worry about that. They worry about the rejection, not about the approach. So I think for me, when it comes to approaching in different societies, it's all about the men's fear of how they will be responded to, or how the women will respond to them when they do the approaching. So I think when it comes to cultural and societal expectations of dating, I do think it needs to change. And maybe it's a case of more men being willing to, I guess, step out of their comfort zone and just going for it. And just really going for it. Because at the end of the day, I can guarantee you now, if you approach a woman for the most part, even if she's not interested, you will make her day. Even if she's got a boyfriend. So I think just go up, shoot your shot. If they say no, don't be rude. Don't say anything disgusting or inappropriate. Just say, okay, all good, thank you, and keep it pushing. Move on with your day. And just to round up, I just want to say, at the end of the day, when it comes to this whole dating thing and the life thing and trying to navigate it, all of us are winging it. This is the first time that all of us have done this. We're all living this earth for the first time, and all are trying to pretty much figure it out as we go along. And so many of us have had negative experiences and traumatic experiences when it comes to dating, that I think it's so important for us to really, really give some grace whenever we are communicating with people, or whenever we are on dates, or whenever we're seeing people, or sleeping with people, or whatever it is you're doing with the people that you're doing it with. I think it's so important for us to understand that we're all coming from different walks of life, and we're all approaching this thing called life and this thing called dating and love from very, very different experiences. And I think once we all start to realize that, I think that's when the experiences will change. And that's when people's opinions and people's outlook on dating in wherever you live, whatever city or country that you're in, I think as soon as we start to see that everyone has an experience, and that experience is what has led them to this point, and that experience is what has made them the way they are. I think once we start noticing that, and we start appreciating that, and start accepting that everyone is different, that is when our dating experiences will literally become a more positive one. Because for me, I think over the last 3 or 4 years, I've gotten to a point now where I completely understand that everyone has had different experiences throughout life, not just in relationships, but just in their childhood, the relationship with their parents. And that is what makes them who they are on this date that you meet them. So I think understanding that and giving people the grace and the safe space to actually feel comfortable enough to maybe open up and explain to you exactly why they feel the way they do, or why they have done the things that they've done, is going to be a key and instrumental part in the dating game and the experience of dating to be a lot more positive. And that's me done, people. I hope this all made sense. I hope I haven't talked shit. And yeah, men, keep approaching, and women, enjoy the approaching, I guess. Peace.